Our scripture this morning is from the Gospel according to John, chapter 15, verses 1 through 8. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thank you, Shannon. Well, good morning, St. Andrews. It's so good to be with you. My name is Jason. If I haven't met you, I'm one of the pastors here. And Happy New Year. I think, can we still say it? It's Happy New Year still, right? Yes. I was reading the other day a Washington Post article about resolutions, and some of us have made them, and we've practiced that, and that's like for generations we've been doing that. But this writer said that maybe a more effective means of finding change is, instead of picking a habit or something that we're going to choose to begin new, that we pick a word, like a theme for the year. And I thought, that's really good. And then I talked to my friend Leslie here at the church, and she said, hey, I'm picking my word for the year. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I was traveling and saw some friends, and one of my best friends said, hey, I picked my word for this year. And I'm like, okay, God, got it. You have those moments where it's like he has to just keep reminding you, like, okay, dummy, here it is. And I thought, well, maybe we should consider a word for this year. And I was reading the scripture passage that Shannon just read for us, and there was one word that sticks out. And maybe you caught it. It's a word that Jesus repeated like 11 times in the beginning of John chapter 15. And it's a word that if we actually, no matter what your other resolutions are, if we will choose to make this word the theme of our year, no matter what comes, good or bad, no matter what you're hoping for, no matter what kind of change you want to see in your life or what you need to do differently, no matter what, if we do this one thing, this one new habit, it will change everything. In fact, it will provide all the things that you actually need for this year. It's going to be super simple. I'm so happy to make this simple for you. In fact, I love this about Jesus and about the Bible, is that he just makes things super, super clear for us. And so I'm going to show you in the next few minutes that this one word, anybody know what it is? Could you pick it out? Remain. I want to show you how remaining can change everything for you this year. To remain means a couple of things, definition-wise. To remain means to stay in a place that you previously occupied. Jessica and I and the kids, we traveled back east for the holidays, and we got back after that. And I have to tell you, stepping off the plane and into Southern California, I want to remain in this place that we've been occupying. I don't care how much rain you had while we were gone, it is still amazing. It was great. That's one thing. Another way to define remain is to continue with a particular quality or role that you have. Or another way to define remain is to continue on existing even after other similar things have stopped existing. And that's a good goal for us for this year, right? Let's just keep existing longer than anybody else. Let's outlive them all. That would be a nice one. But to remain attached to Christ, to remain attached to Jesus, is what we want to do. This is what he tells the disciples in the passage we just read. I'm going to give you some context. I'm going to tell you how we do it. I'm going to tell you why we should. And then I want to give you a couple of moments of practical application for you to figure out how to walk this out this year. And it's going to be super simple. So much so that no matter how long you've been walking with Jesus, or if you aren't yet, if you're just checking this out, no matter how old you are, you can do what I'm about to tell you. And it's also so incredibly deep that no matter how long you've been a follower of Jesus, there's more for you here. This is how good he is. So before I jump into it, let me give you the context. Before Jesus spoke those words that we just read in John 15, it happened on the night that he was about to go get betrayed. The very night he was going to be arrested and taken to trial and crucified the next day. But nobody in the room knew that. He was gathered with his disciples for a celebration, a holiday meal, like many of us just did. And in that holiday meal, just like ours, there's all kinds of expectation and hopes. There's the nostalgia for what it's supposed to be like, and there's supposed to be a lot of joy. And then there's reality that doesn't always work out that way, right? Because along with those big holiday celebrations, there's also a lot of pressure for things to go exactly the way they should. And somebody always messes it up, don't they? Oh, was it you? Someone always messes them up. Same thing, in this, they're gathered for what's called the Passover. And it's this celebration where they remember God's faithfulness. And they're up in this room, and they're eating a meal, and things have gotten kind of weird. Like, Jesus seems worried. He actually is anxious. And nobody can kind of tell what's going on. Like, what is that about? And then he does this really strange thing. He gets down on his knees, and he washes their dirty feet. Like, yuck. And they're all kind of like, okay, rabbis don't usually do this. And then he looks at all of them and he says, I'm about to be betrayed by someone. And they're in this very room. Dun, dun, dun. It's like AD 30 version of Knives Out. And they're all looking at each other and they're having their meal and they're like, is it you? Is it you? Oh, it's definitely him. They're trying to figure it out. And Jesus then says to one of the close ones, I'll show you who it is. And he hands a piece of bread to Judas. But not everybody in the room hears this. So Judas takes the bread and he runs out of the room. Like he just throws his napkin down and he leaves. And some of the people in the room are like, what is going on? And the tension is rising. And Jesus looks more anxious. And Peter, who's always running his mouth, he says really loud, like, I don't know what's up with Judas, but it doesn't matter. I will always be with you. And Jesus goes, really? Because you don't know this, but in a couple of hours, you're going to pretend like you don't even know who I am. Guys, this is about to get real. And when it does, I want to tell you what can help you go through the next few hours, the next few days. In fact, the next year and even for us today, what's going to allow you and me to go through whatever happens this year, whatever 2023 brings, highs and lows, good and bad, things you didn't see coming or things that you planned for, whatever it is, this is what Jesus spoke to them. He says, but first, let's get up and leave. They're like, where are we going? He's like, just come with me. They throw their napkins down. Everybody's wigged out. They walk out of the room. They're about to walk across the Kidron Valley through a vineyard and all the way to the Garden of Gethsemane where he's going to get arrested. But they don't know that. They will start to leave, and Jesus says, oh, before we go. And he launches into the verses we just read. I am the true vine, and you're the branches. Now, that's not like that compelling maybe for you and for me, because we don't have the history, the context that they did. But just so that you know, all along, the people of Israel were told by God that they were his vine. He was the gardener or the vineyard owner. He was the one who had created them, and he had kept them. They were special. And he wanted them to produce fruit, to do what they were supposed to do. And that was going to be for his glory. And it was beautiful, except they didn't do it very well. And so when Jesus says, I am the true vine, everybody's like, hold on, this might be blasphemous. I thought it was Israel. See, right off the bat, he gets their attention and he says, from here on out, to get through what you're about to go through, your attachment has to be to me. It's not to your religion. It's not to your nationality. It's not to your ethnicity. It's not to your political party, because he had a group of very mixed people in the room. You don't stay attached to any of that. If you want to get through what's coming, you got to remain attached to me. I'm the vine, you're the branch. You remain in me. Now, that's kind of interesting. Except that as he's walking next in just a few moments through this vineyard and the moonlight is shining down on it and they're seeing this illustration of what he's trying to tell them, they're looking at vines that have had branches grafted in. Do you know what what grafting is? Any of you good gardeners? I'm terrible at this, but Jessica is great. And so I know a little bit about it. And what happens is if you want to introduce some new kind of fruit, or you want to introduce something new to an old vine, you graft. And I want to tell you how that is, because this metaphor of being grafted in is one that God uses for you and me. This is why the religion part of Israel didn't matter anymore. What Jesus was saying is, from here on out, this is about me. And it applies to us today. So when you graft something, the first thing you got to do is take the original source, like the vine, in the case of a nice vineyard up in Paso Robles or wherever you might find your favorite vineyard. And you're going to take the good vine and you're going to cut it first really deeply. Like you got to hurt. It's got to get all the way down to the sap-producing center where the life is. And that's actually what Jesus did for us, right? He allowed himself to be cut completely to where it was the center and core of who was the life. And then you take another branch that you want to add and you cut it, but it's got to be a really clean cut. Like no obstructions, no debris, nothing that's dirt on there. And then you stick it into that deep cut in the vine and you bind it up and you allow nature to do its work. And Jesus is using that picture for us. In fact, I got a video, if you've never seen it, just to kind of show you what this might look like. In the rest of this message, you can imagine, see, we're making that deep cut, and then you insert the branch in, and then you tie it up to make sure it stays together. And I think of like, that's just tape there, but for us, it's like the Holy Spirit holds us when we come to Christ. He's the one keeping us connected. And then you see sap, the life-giving stuff starts to like flow and it squeezes out. It goes from the vine into the branch. And then eventually, after time passes, that sap causes the two to fuse and to become one. And then pretty soon, there's new growth that starts to take place. There's something new that's born, and you see that green branch. That's what Jesus was describing. Remain attached to me. I'm the vine. You're the branches, guys. This is how you're going to get through it. This is how you're going to do it. And so they get it. And you and I get it. We got to remain attached. Here's a couple things about grafting. Not only do you need that clean cut and removing things that get in the way, you also need to do constant pruning. To make this thing really work, to get the best grapes, you got to prune over time. And some of you do this with your flowers or plants. And you prune. Here's the thing. When we apply it to our life, though, and this is just like a freebie for this year, there are places in your and my life where sometimes I think we feel like, gosh, God, that hurts. That was painful. Why did you allow that to happen? What'd you do there? And sometimes we think it's punishment. But I want to ask you to consider with me just at the beginning of this year, if maybe what you thought was punishment could actually be pruning. Is it possible that that pain that you feel is not to injure you, it's actually to help you become more fruitful? See, to the branch, the shears of the gardener coming, that looks scary no matter what. They don't know that it's for their good. And maybe God's doing that in your life. I just wanted to leave that with you for a moment and have you think, is it possible that God's actually trying to make you more productive? See, Jesus was talking to them about this idea of attachment. It costs. And truthfully, this is a part of our problem, some of us, with Christianity. It's just like the Jews of the early days, or just like some of the people in the room with him. When they thought of their faith, it was more about association than about attachment. You know, like, I know Jesus. I know about him. Been to a lot of classes. Grew up in Sunday school. Got baptized here at St. Andrews. But it's not, you're associated with him. The life-giving force of Christ is not flowing into your life because you're not attached. And what I want for us is for us to be attached this year. To not just be associated, but attached. Because here's what he said, that apart from me, if you're not attached, you can't do anything. And I know, especially if you're not a Christian, some of you are like, well, that's dumb. Of course I can do things. But here's what I mean. Here's what he meant. You can't do anything that's of lasting value. And that's why you made all those resolutions to begin with, right? You wanted something that's going to last. You want a change in your life to be powerful, to not just last for a week or a couple of months, but for this to change things for you, it's transformation. And he says, if you don't stay connected to me, you can't do anything that's lasting. Nothing that's going to bring glory to me or that's going to increase my kingdom. So we got to remain attached. Now, the question that I'm sure you're asking is the one that they were asking too. Okay, it sounds good, but why? And he gave us a couple of promises. Did you see in verse 5, two things? Verse 5, he says, here's one promise. If you remain attached to me, you will bear much fruit. I guarantee you, if you stick with me, kid, I guarantee you that you will have fruit in your life. You'll see the good results of it. But the second one is in verse 7. It's great too. He says, and if you ask anything in my name, I'll answer. That's a pretty good why. Answered prayer. Now, he's not saying, pick your favorite greed and make up this little willy-nilly list of all the things you want to make your life easier or better, whatever, and just lay it for me and you get it all. I've tried that. It doesn't work. But what he is saying is, as you remain attached, your desires will change. You will begin to see the world the way I do. And what you'll want in life, what you'll pray for, are the same things that I'm praying for and going to do anyway. And they're for your good. In fact, Charles Spurgeon said this, that prayer is the natural outgushing. It's a cool word. Only a person like Spurgeon could say that. A natural outgushing of a soul in communion with Jesus. The spiritual life is mastering in him, and so his aspirations are holy, heavenly, and godlike. Now, I know that for some of you, there's like a letdown there. It's like, yeah, but I wanted to be able to name my thing and get it. And that's just not how God works. But can you imagine the experience this year of praying things, of like going to God and asking him for them, and then you see them come to be? I was in the lobby after the first service, and this lady came up to me, and she said, hey, do you remember at Christmas Eve, I was in pain, and you gathered a couple people around, and you prayed for me, and I could breathe again, like I had asthma, and it wasn't working? And I was like, yeah, I remember. She's like, I've been breathing perfectly fine ever since December 24th. Like, God healed her. That's not me or the deacons or whatever. That is the power of God that just said, yeah, this is in line with what I want. I'm doing it. Now, she had prayed for that a lot of other days before. I don't know why God didn't choose to answer it that day. But what I do know is, for his glory in his time and your good, he will answer these prayers if we remain attached. It's simple. How do we do it? That's what the disciples wanted to know. And Jesus is he's awesome. He's straightforward. He goes, okay, I know what you're asking. How are we going to do it? So he says this in verse 9. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love. This is where I'm going to meddle a little bit. It's January 8th, so we got all year for us to get back on good terms after I push and poke a little. So we're going to be fine. Our relationship, me and you, it's okay. But for a moment, I'm going to poke. Jesus says, if you want to remain in me, it's super simple. All you got to do is obey. How many of you was obedience easy when you were 8, 15, 27, right now? It's not always that easy. I told you it's simple. It's just not easy. Jesus says, if you obey my commandments, you will remain in me. Think about this. Jesus obeyed God. He is God. He came and he healed and he did miracles and he walked around and he decided all the stuff he's going to do. And he says, but I only did that in obedience to the Father. When he told me to do it, I did it. If he didn't, I did not. God himself was obedient. There must be a reason. What's the purpose? What's the why behind obedience? Because this is one thing I know about God. He's so good, he doesn't just give us random rules. It's always something in it for us and for him, both. And Jesus says, here's why. Keep my commands just like I've kept my Father's. I've told you this, here's the payoff, so that my joy may be in you and your joy might be complete. The fruit of obedience, the reward of obedience is joy. That's what you want, isn't it? When you were sitting down December 31st, and you were making your little list of all the things that you're going to do, like how many times you're going to work out and what you're going to eat and all that stuff. On the other side of that, even if it didn't show up in your list, what you wanted was the joy of being able to look in the mirror or being able to hike for that trip you're going to take. You wanted the joy of your body working better than it does now, didn't you? You wanted the joy of your business producing and growing. When you made that resolution, because you wanted the joy of seeing that fruit come. You wanted relationships healed and healthy, because ultimately we all want joy. It's what we're made for. And God is the most joyful being in the universe. I'm going to do a sermon about that some other time, but he's the most joyful being in the universe. I'm convinced. G.K. Chesterton said this. He said, joy, which was the small publicity of the pagan, is the gigantic secret of the Christian. I love that. Joy is the gigantic secret of the Christian. In other words, for those apart from Christ, we have to make a big deal about the things, the moments that go right in our life. And it's why a lot of times the life apart from Jesus just doesn't get experienced as joyful. There are moments, there are seasons, there's fun, but overall it's not this deep and settled sense of joy. So we make a big deal about it when it happens. But he says for the believer, it's the current running through our life all the time. And yeah, we have moments of sorrow and pain and sadness, but that's not the real story. This is what's possible if we obey. Obey the commands. This is something D.A. Carson said one time. He's like, there's nobody more miserable than a Christian who has hedged his bet on obedience. Some of us have been this person before. Because he doesn't or she doesn't love sin enough to enjoy all its pleasure, and she doesn't love Christ enough to enjoy all his promise. We're in this in-between, like we're ambivalent. And so I want, this is part of my poking. Let's pause right here and go, if you haven't experienced the joy that you'd like, is it possible? Is it possible that there's something that you know to obey that you just haven't been? And could this one thing, choosing to obey, to remain, could that bring joy in your life that you're looking for everywhere else? The reward of obedience is always joy. Okay, so I got it. Remain attached by obeying. Obeying gets me joy. Jesus, what do I obey? Because I've looked at that book and it's pretty thick. And I remember getting told when I was a kid, there's a lot of rules in there. So what do I obey? And look, Jesus is so good. Again, look at the next set of scriptures. He says, okay, let me make it plain. My command is this. You want to obey my commands? Do this. Love one another as I've loved you. Simple. Love one another like I've loved you. Nobody's had greater love than this, than somebody to sacrifice or to lay down their life for somebody else. You're my friends if you do what I command. What command? Love each other. Sacrificially, fully. Love each other well, and you got it all. You might find this to sound on the border of heretical, but I promise you it's not, because Jesus said it, not me. If you do that right, if you and I love God and love people according to God's definition, you will get all the rest of the commandments right. Every single one of them. You have to do this one thing. I know that sounds too simple. I know it sounds like I must be leaving something out. There's a loophole, a catch, or whatever. In fact, this is the only way. There is no loophole or catch. Andy Stanley, who's just an amazing preacher and communicator, makes things super simple. He said it like this, that what we do is we have to define this love the way that God defines it. And once we do, we ask this one question in every setting, in every situation. What does love require of me now? What does love require of me in this moment? Got to have the right definition of love. To love is to will and work for the good of somebody else. There's a sacrificial quality for it. It's to choose to want the best and to put effort and action into that. To will and work for the good of someone else, that is love. And so if you and I will simply, in every situation we have, I'm going to show you this in just a second. Don't just go with me for a moment, because I know some of you are looking at me like, It can't be that. It can't be. If you and I will ask in every moment, what does love require of me? And then we do it, if we obey, you will keep all the commands. Okay, so let's think about it. With your roommate, maybe you're married to your roommate, I don't know, but with your roommate, they come and they have a position, and they've taken this position, and they're 100% wrong, and you know it, and they should know it, but they're wrong. But they are just standing firm. This is what it's going to be. And you have the opportunity to either rip them to shreds, tell them how they're wrong, and not only they're wrong about this, but they've been wrong about everything since the day that you guys first moved in together. You can do that, or you can choose to exhibit patience and kindness and mercy. What does love require of me now? Okay. Your kid comes home from college. And, they've had a psychology class and a philosophy class, so now they're the smartest person on the planet. And they can tell you all the things that you did wrong that messed them up and why they need counseling, all that stuff. Some of you have already experienced that, or you were that. I was. And they come home and they tell you all this stuff. And you can let me tell you what it's really like. Besides, I wrote the checks, right? Do you need to set them straight with truth? Maybe. Probably. But you know what love does? Love always protects the relationship while it addresses the issue. So, can you decide to give them truth, unvarnished? Sure. But what does love require of you now is to do that in a way that protects the relationship, because that's what you want. You can think about it with your money. To will and work for the good of someone else. How do I choose to spend this dollar or budget this? Is it going to be simply spent on me and my desires and consumption and materialism and whatever? Or am I going to choose to use this in a way that blesses someone else after it takes care of my needs? What does love require of me now? Are we getting it? It's simple. It's just not easy. But he didn't say you have to make it easy. He said, you stay attached to me. How? By obeying. What do we obey? Love. What does love look like? Love is to will and work for the good of somebody else. I've solved your problems. It's 11:18, and we're going to finish early. See? It's that simple. Jesus knows, though, that this love is going to require sacrifice on our part. And that's why we have to stay attached. Because if we don't stay where his life is flowing through us, where the sap, the goodness of him is flowing and working in us, we will not be able to do this. You've got to stay connected to him, because trying harder won't work. You have never seen a branch just work really, really hard to make a grape. It doesn't happen. But the branch, if it just allows the life of the vine to flow through it, grapes are inevitable. So you don't have to try harder this year. You're welcome. You just, as Brandon said earlier, we got to trust a little deeper. We got to stay attached through obedience and love. And the kind of love that's sacrificial. It's interesting. This makes sense to us. But you've never seen a tree eat its own fruit, have you? The fruit is never for the tree or the vine. The vine has never wrapped itself around a grape that it just produced and consumed it. Because the fruit that we produce, that God produces through us, is not ultimately for us. It's for someone else. It's so that his kingdom would come and that his name would be made famous. Jesus said it right there. This is so that my Father will get glory, and he is not going to miss a chance to get glory. God is just like that. And so if we will allow this to happen, we will get to see. This is why I'm telling you, all those resolutions that you made, they're good and you can keep them, but just put this remain attached to Christ over it. Because even if you were off, there's a corrective to this. Let's say you thought that the best thing for this year was for you to go all in, give more time and energy to your business. Maybe that's good, maybe it's not, I don't know. But if God says, I know this is going to turn you into a workaholic and sacrifice your family this year, then as you remain attached, he will work through you and guide you away from that resolution. You can't mess it up if we stay attached. So, Jesus ends this little part, verse 16, with a nice reminder. He says, you know what? You didn't even choose me. Just remember when you're struggling to do this, to believe it, I picked you. When you were still a rebel, when you were still worried about your own way, I chose you. I don't make mistakes. I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit that will last. That's that eternal part. And then he throws this in again. And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. One more reminder. Answered prayer is a benefit of remaining attached. And then he says, and finally, just one more, verse 17. This is my command in case you didn't get it the first time. Love each other. There's an old saying about John, the disciple. When he got to be like 90 years old, he was still a part of the community of faith. And he wrote some of the letters, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, as well as the gospel that has his name. And it says that he used to, like, every time the people were gathered, he would say, little children love each other. And in fact, you see that all throughout his letters. And then they would meet together next time, and John would get brought into the room, and he would say, little children love each other. And I have to imagine that the church gathered there were like, we've heard it, okay, got it. And legend is that somebody asked him at one point, like, why do you keep repeating that? And he said, because if we do this, everything else works. This is the only thing that matters. But he also knew that this is the hardest thing. See, because there are moments where I just don't want to will and work for your good. I mean, not you, but, someone else. I don't want to. And the only way that I could overcome that you can overcome that, is if we remain attached to Christ. Through prayer, through engaging in His Scripture, through finding yourself as a part of this community. That's what the church is. It exists to help you. All these programs and things, these are not just like a bunch of activity that we like to put on events and stuff. These are all ways, from Bible studies to small groups to the things that we offer, they're ways to help you and me stay attached, to learn what it looks like to love, and to have the opportunity to put it into practice. So take a step this year. Because whatever happens, we can do this. We can take whatever mountain He puts in front of us. We can accomplish whatever goal He has for St. Andrews. You can accomplish and become all that He wants you to be. We can do this not because we're that good, but because He will do it through us. So that's your word. And if you have your own, maybe consider adding this or replacing. Remain attached to Christ. Can I pray for us? And I want to pray this way. In fact, I'd like us to pray. Like, I'm going to, but don't just let me do all the work for you. Like, you pray too. And I'm going to pray this way. Like, let's pray for God to give us courage and wisdom. God, show me right now, what does it look like for me to love somebody? You got a situation, it came up. I didn't even have to tell you what it was. You're thinking about it already. And this is what it means to obey. God, give us wisdom on what that is and give us courage to do it. And then just go start this afternoon with one small step.